This week, we look at two more new books from our friends at Avery Hill Publishing. First, Kumar and I review indie sci-fi book The Hard Switch by Owen D. Pomery. Then, Emmet joins me to discuss Nicole Goux' Pet Peeves, which is a horror book of a sort, and one on which we had a significant difference of opinion. We hope you'll spread the word about Deconstructing Comics. Tell your friends about us, share episodes on social media, and also send us suggestions for topics we could cover. Email us at mail@deconstructingcomics.com. This is Tim.
And this is Kumar.
This is Emmet.
And this is Deconstructing Comics. Welcome to Deconstructing Comics. This is Tim in Tokyo with Kumar in Melbourne. I struggled with that recently. I'm always saying like the wrong person's name.
You got a lot of guest hosts these days, that's why.
Well, yeah, and so many different series. I keep starting the wrong show. Anyway, so we've got an Avery Hill book here that isn't coming out till October. We've got a sneak peek PDF here.
I didn't realize it wasn't out yet. I was wondering about that.
Yeah. This is called The Hard Switch by Owen D. Pomery, and it's about a world, I assume sometime in the future, or else it's Star Wars and it's out in space and who knows when it happened.
Actually, I think it's way in the future.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll give my reasons for that a little bit later, maybe.
Okay.
Once we start to get into the nuts and bolts of it.
All right. So anyway, in this world, there is a mineral called alkanite that enables what they call intersystem jump navigation, which I guess is kind of like hyperspace.
Yeah, so, okay, well, I can get to it right now already, right out of the gate. So this is basically, so if they jump without this alkanite, this mineral or whatever it is, they don't know where they're going to land. So they can end up getting like at one point in the book, they come across a book that's sheared off like in front, or, they could land in the middle of a rock or something like that, or in the middle of a plant or something like that could happen. Mm-hmm. So it's a risk if you don't have the alkanite. The alkanite somehow is able to make masses of calculations. It allows the computers to do huge amounts of like quantum computing levels of information, which is exactly what the spice in Dune does. The navigators consume it so that they can do space jumps. Because without it, they might end up teleporting into a planet or something like that. So they ingest the navigators ingest the spice in Dune, and then they're able to foresee what the clear path is going to be to their destination.
Okay.
And this seems so. I felt like this idea had to come from Dune in The Hard Switch, was my guess. And that's why I feel like it's far in the future, because in Dune, there are no aliens. It's way far in the future, and humans have populated all these other planets. And sometimes through technology, they've changed themselves a little bit so they seem a little bit less human, or they got changed powers and things. But everybody came from Earth originally, which is why I kind of suspected, because this is like space travel has been happening for a long time in this graphic novel. So I felt like, okay, maybe these are people, maybe they've popped, but then stuff happens that makes it seem like there have been humans or extreme humanoids, very almost identical to humans, living on other planets for a very long time. So it's not quite clear to me, but if it's the Dune influence, then maybe it is all just humans that have scattered over thousands of years.
Okay, well, this does have some aliens in it. They're not.
Yes, it does. That's
humans.
True too. Yeah.
So, and they don't ingest the alkanite, as far as I can tell.
No,
they just use it in their computers somehow.
Yeah.
And so alkanite is expected to run out soon. So our heroes in this book and other people are like scavenging alkanite wherever they can find it, wrecks of old ships and whatever.
Yeah. And the rich people who are rich are going to be able to afford to make one last move to wherever they want to move to before the alkanite runs out, and people who are poor are just going to be stuck where they are. And that's kind of one of the themes of the book.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so like you said, they can jump without it, but they can't jump safely without
right,
it.
yeah,
So
yeah.
they're expecting there's going to be an awful lot less travel when the alkanite runs out.
Yeah, yeah. Or it'll be very slow or something like that.
Yeah, I suppose they can still travel, but a lot more slowly.
Yeah.
So we're following these two young women, Ada and Heike.
Scavengers, I think they're, or salvagers. What do they call them? Salvagers. There's a few factions. Her hunters, which are identified, and they show up. Like we see hunters show up, but I'm not sure what they do. And there's also something else called wreckers, which I don't think we see the wreckers, and I don't know what they are or what they do. But we know they're trouble. Maybe they're just berserkers that wreck everything in their path. I don't know. We don't even know if they're necessarily people or what. But they're mentioned a few times. Mm-hmm. But these ladies are salvagers.
Yeah. I'm looking at the text at the very beginning. It says they've taken up the dangerous art of salvaging unspent alkanite from historic shipwrecks. Right. So they're salvaging stuff from other ships. And then they run into some, scoundrels along the way, and there are some action sequences in it, but a lot of it is kind of talky. There's a lot of conversation. Yeah. And the first time I read it, I didn't pay enough attention to what they were talking about, and I didn't know what was going on at the end. But yeah, you have to really pay attention and keep track of the different things and people and situations that they talk about. Because there are several conversations about these Moreki caves. Yeah, you kind of referred to this, that, there are some artifacts there that are very far from their source, but they've been there since before the jump navigation was invented. So they're trying to figure out how that happened.
Yes, and there's a possibility that they might have had some form of travel that was pre-alkanite interspace travel, and if that's true, and they can rediscover what that technology was, it would re-democratize space travel, or they wouldn't be stuck like. There's a constant impending doom. Everybody's talking about how they're going to be stuck very soon once this alkanite runs out. So yeah, they're hoping to rediscover that technology if it exists. They're not really sure. They just have these weird artifacts with some strange writing on them from this cave, from this planet or originally the writings from the planet that Ada is from. Mm-hmm. But it somehow ended up here, and she's maybe the only one that can recognize it. I don't know why that should be the case, but it seems to be. I guess there's not a lot of her type of people around, which is, again, makes me wonder, is she even a human being if necessarily? I mean, she looks like one exactly, but I'm not sure what she is. I can't remember what the name of her planet was.
Oh, it started with an M.
Yeah.
I want to say Manta. It's not quite right.
No.
I didn't put it in my notes. Together with them in their ship, there's this tentacled creature called Malik.
Yeah, looks like an octopus.
Yeah, more or less like an octopus.
And he floats in this liquid engine room tank thing.
And he's kind of egotistical.
A little bit, but then he's kind of reasonable about searching for this, investigating the ancient relics, which Heike is kind of against. She thinks it's a pipe dream, and it's way off their trajectory to go looking or investigating this thing. But he kind of strangely is maybe we should check it out. Assuming it's a he, I don't know, actually, now that I think about it.
There were a couple of things that kind of stuck out for me about this book, just not about the story, but one was that the art, we start out with the scene that's in, I don't know, kind of like a Grand Canyon type environment.
Yeah.
And the sunlight and shadows were really convincing.
Yeah, it's really awesome, actually. I was stunned.
I mean, I felt like I was there.
Yeah.
And it's not photorealistic, but just the lighting is so good.
Yeah, I immediately noticed that and wrote it down as well. And I think maybe, I don't know what his method is. Maybe he uses computers for the shading or something. I don't know, but it's really great because, when Ada goes out in the sun, it's like this, you get the sun shadows on the rocks and stuff, and then she goes into the ship. this wreck that this historic shipwreck that she's going into, and then the shadows completely change, and it really looks like you really get the sense of the atmosphere inside the ship from the way that patches of light are coming in there through the cockpit windows and stuff like that. It's really pretty great.
Yeah, or on this PDF page 17 with Heike in the cockpit of their ship, and her face is in shadow. Lower down on her body, there's sunlight, and you can see the sunlight and shadows on the rocks behind her. And it feels so real. I
want to say, I really love an indie sci-fi comic when I come across one, especially in color, like that Brandon Graham Prophet series that came out 10 years ago or something, and with some like weird aliens and stuff. And this really hit the spot for that, and the art was similarly like really just amazing throughout, and that kind of stuff, and the design, all the design work and the aliens. I love that these quote unquote hunters show up. While she's in the ship, she meets another alien in the ship that's also scavenging, but that alien says, we've worked this wreck for a long time. I don't know quite what that means, like, because then two people well, I guess it's explained why two people show up at the same time, but anyway, this weird yellow cube is lowered down from the hunter's ship into the wreck, and then it's like transformed into this robot inside, this droid. And I really thought that was a really neat idea to have it's like the cube is its transport shape, and then it transforms into like an Imperial probe droid on the inside. And then I love the laser sound effects of dinka dinka dinka, and all this kind of kooky stuff that happens in it. And didn't really, these early pages, you don't really get a sense of what it's really going to be about, like, because it's 100 pages or so, and I'm like, this is a long sequence. I'm like, wow, is this going to be kind of the thing? And then no, it kind of, the book evolves into, as you talked about, very talky, but not only just talky, it's also, there's a lot of sci-fi stuff in here which doesn't get explained, like the Wreckers. And every once in a while somebody will mention a thing and you're like, what is that thing? And it's not really explained, much like Dune. No. They just there's no hand-holding through it. You're in that world, you're embedded into it, and you have to live with the language they're speaking to an extent.
But another thing about the talkiness is that I thought the conversations felt really realistic too.
Yes.
They felt, I felt like they could have been like actual conversations. And there's some joking around. Heike gets teased about this hat that she wears.
Yes.
And
there's a lot of texture to it. Yeah. For that kind of stuff. Word. There's not. It's not one thing the whole time. It's like I'm looking at this scene where they meet this merchant in the market, and he's like, what's that octopus thing? Is this a pet? And there's like 5-6 panels devoted to this gag about the octopus pulling a gun on this guy. And it's not relevant to the story really or anything. It's maybe a bit of character development, but it's just there. It's just there for the pacing, I guess. But then, right on the next page, Ada asks Heike. Ada has come to the market first. Heike has landed their ship, and Heike comes over and meets her. And then Ada says, "Were there no mooring bays?" And I'm like, "Wait a second. Why? How does she know they're not moored? Like, what's the exact sequence of things that happen here? Like, certain things like that weren't clear to me. I don't know if it's necessarily a fault of the book." Or if it could have been 10 pages longer to explain what she meant by the ship not being moored, or how she knew it wasn't moored, or all that kind of stuff. But there were scenes like that where, like, okay, I'm scratching my head, but then you're just kind of pulled along anyway. It's not like you have a chance to slow down. You're not going to find the answer anyway, so you just keep moving along.
Right.
Oh, they also got a fish. They've got Jones, the sad fish, as he's described. It also works in the engine, and is apparently less intelligent than Malik, the octopus mechanic.
Yeah, although he gets a lot of work done, apparently.
Yes.
He doesn't talk, as far as we can see. I don't know how they communicate with him, but Jones is kind of there, and he's kind of the butt of jokes sometimes.
Yes. Yeah, those few occasions he turns up, yeah. So they have to get their ship repaired. And they go to this mechanic, and I got real Mandalorian vibes from this. Did you watch Mandalorian season 1 even?
I watched the first couple seasons, yeah.
Okay, yeah. So when they go to that mechanic, it really felt like the same Did you get the same vibe from it of like when Mandalorian stops to see that mechanic a couple of times to get his ships repaired?
I didn't think of that, but yeah, it is kind of the same feel.
It's like a garage. I guess it's a space garage is maybe what it boils down to.
Yeah, it's science fiction car talk, I guess.
Yes. Yeah, maybe something like that. Yeah, and then there's a sequence where Ada... So they figured out they've been betrayed because the hunters showed up at the same time as them at that wreck. And the person... So she figures they've been betrayed by the person that gave them the tip. And there's this whole thing where she tricks the guy. She pays a kid to ring his doorbell. Mm-hmm. And then she sneaks in through the window. But she's also paid the kid to ring the doorbell again. And I didn't get... what was the point of that? The doorbell rings, the guy reaches for his gun, and shoots him. I'm like, well, why did the doorbell have to ring for that? Was she trying to lure him into pulling the gun by giving him the opportunity of the doorbell ringing?
Maybe. Yeah, when the doorbell rings the second time, then maybe the idea was that he would hope that it distracted her and that he would use that to pull a gun on her, and so when he did that, then he was finished.
Yeah, but she's the one that asked the kid to ring the doorbell the second time, not him.
Right. But I think she wanted to see how he was going to react.
Oh, I see. I think it's entrapment myself.
Well, yeah, it is kind of. But yeah, he had offered the same job to them and to somebody else. Yeah. And so that's what she and Heike are upset about.
Yeah. So things are getting more and more mercenary as the resources dwindling, the Alkanites dwindling.
Now, the fact that he reached for his gun, the first time I read it, I missed that, or I didn't understand what that panel was saying. I'm like, why did she kill him?
Yeah.
But then I figured out, yeah, okay, those are gun handles. And if you look at the large panel at the top of the page, you can see where that little box is. The pointer of the word balloon obscures it a tiny bit, but you can see where that thing is that he is reaching for when the doorbell rang.
Yeah.
And apparently he's left-handed.
Oh, right. I didn't even think of that. But he might not even be human. We don't, again, do we have a Star Wars world here or a Dune world? We don't know. So then after that's when they go to the space mechanic, much like Mandalorian. But then they hang out with the mechanic in the mechanic's house, which was interesting. Auther, yeah.
What is he? Looks a little bit like a huge parakeet.
I thought that too. Some kind of birdie kind of thing with weird back like dog legs though. Oh yeah, I guess it could be like bird legs. Yeah, that character was very Star Warsy for sure. Yeah, but here we learn about all the Auther reports like all the people that are dying, taking risks and stuff, or being attacked by wreckers. Again, don't know what the wreckers are, but we know he mentions one point. Came up. It was important later that there's one team that got jumped by wreckers outside Siet Bolt Station, and that comes up again later because they have to go there and
Yeah, although you really have to pay attention again.
Oh, yes. I had to go through the second time. Yeah.
I had to they mentioned this before, but in what context? I don't remember.
Yes, I had the exact same thing. I was like, I heard that name.
And they're kind of upset about it, but yeah, what was that again? And you have to kind of go flipping back.
Yeah, there's no hand-holding for sure.
No,
so,
not at all.
Then they get an offer, as they're about to leave, they were going to a market, or where were they going to go? They were going to go to some place to get fixed up and stuff or buy supplies. But then they get an offer of a job to carry this transport. And even this involved, I had to flip back because they get this transport from some company called X2. And the next time we get a full-page splash of their ship, it's got a big X2 on it. And I was like, wait a second, are they an X2 company or what is this? And then I realized that's the cargo that goes on their ship. Pomery's actually done a really cool thing with the design of this ship, where the top of the cargo ship is just empty. If you flip back to the earlier pages, you'll see it's like there's a gap, there's like an alcove kind of thing in the ship in that space, and now you got this big yellow thing on top, which is how they get cargo transported around.
Yeah, they don't put it in; they just attach it to the ship.
Yes. Which is also kind of a thing in the Han Solo movie. They had that big thing that slotted into the Millennium Falcon in the fork of it. That was like where they put their cargo. But I thought it was just a really neat design. But I had to flip back to figure it out. But it was really a very cool thing. Yeah, but they don't know what this... It's a don't ask kind of situation.
Yeah, well, Arthur just... He lets them know, like, oh, there's this cargo thing we found, and it's marked low priority, but maybe you can make a little money transporting it.
Yeah.
And so they do, and then they hear sounds coming from it that they decide is a distress signal, that there must be someone in it.
Yeah, do you think Arthur knew what was in it? I guess not. There's no way.
I don't think so.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, Arthur seems like a nice thing.
A nice creature, or a nice parakeet.
Yeah. I think we're supposed to assume Arthur's a good on the good guy's side. Yeah. So then they hear the distress. How much are we supposed? This isn't out till October. How much are we allowed to spoil this kind of stuff? This is all really key stuff to the plot.
Right. Well. I don't know. The other thing I wanted to say, and this is not the first time this has happened with an Avery Hill book, but a lot of stuff is never resolved.
Yeah.
And I was like, what? There's nothing indicating that there's a sequel. And actually, I wrote to Katrina at Avery Hill about this, and she got a quote from Owen,
the
author, and this is what he said. I always wanted to tell the story in a way that you come in as the audience, run to catch up, and then it shoots off just as you've caught up.
Makes
like
sense.
Like a small slice from a huge situation.
Yeah.
That said, it is part of a conceptual larger arc in my head, and there are quite a few stories from the galaxy that I'm interested in telling, but we'll have to see what happens.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure it depends, at least in part, on the sales of this book, and it's not even out yet. So
well, it's very much like Star Wars, where, Darth Vader's TIE fighter gets blasted off into space, but he's still alive out there, and it's like, have we resolved anything? We get a medal ceremony for the heroes, but Darth Vader's still out there, and so is the rest of the Empire. So it was like very ballsy of George Lucas to think, well, here's my $7 million movie that's going to be a financial failure, almost guaranteed, because it was a science fiction movie in 1977. To leave it with an open ending was crazy. And I think it felt like in this, it was like, you've got an independent graphic novel and you think it's going to sell enough that it's going to warrant sequels. I sure hope so, but that is a ballsy move for sure.
Also, I wanted to throw in my nitpickiest complaint ever.
Okay.
In the dialogue, in the word balloons, the periods are too small.
Yeah.
I almost missed them sometimes.
Yeah, but is that a PDF problem though, I wonder?
Well, yeah, probably looking at it on the page, you wouldn't quite have so much of a problem with that.
Maybe my monitor's not big enough. I did wonder that. Yeah. I had to reread a few sentences because I didn't know where they ended. Because
they are unusually small periods.
Yeah, because you've got the sci-fi jargon in there as well, so you don't know if a capitalized word is the beginning of a sentence or just the word of a grav gen system or something, Yeah. So yeah.
Or for our British listeners, full stops are too small.
Yes.
And this is a British publisher, so
yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, it's a little frustrating to not get the end and not even know if the end is coming or the next chapter. But, I mean, it's an interesting book just kind of for the world and the art and the realistic dialogue. And it's kind of a challenging book. I read it 3 times.
Whoa, okay.
Was getting more each time, like, oh, okay, and kind of making the connections.
Right. Did you, so did we want to talk about when they hear the noise coming from the thing that they're transporting? Did we want to actually do we want to spoil all the stuff that's happening here, or?
Yeah, maybe let's leave some of it for people to read for themselves,
Okay.
I think.
All I would say is, well, I think it's... I think if I say that it's very contemporary, maybe people already guess what's in this cargo that they're transporting. Maybe that's too much of. Maybe that's already spoiled it for you. Maybe if I say you can guess what it is, you're like, oh, I know what it is. And the fact that I've mentioned rich and poor people right at the outset is maybe giving away a little bit about what's going on.
Yeah, I thought it certainly touches on contemporary issues, but I don't think it hits you over the head with them.
No, but I certainly, that sequence in particular, I mean, when that came up and you find out what's in there, I was like, oh, okay. It's just that one sequence. Like, it's not anywhere else in the rest of the book. And, the whole extraction thing on the spaceship at the opening scene, there's some of it that's just pure sci-fi, but some of it is, the best sci-fi, or maybe all sci-fi is about the present, really, because the writers are in the present. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, it's very topical, let's say. And then so when she goes, Ada, they go to this planet to meet this guy that bought these artifacts with the ancient writing on them. And while they're there, Ada goes in, Heike stays with the ship, and Heike's attacked. And I immediately guessed who hired those people to attack her. I was like, oh, okay. I see what's going on here. And then there's this action sequence. There's this huge action sequence at the end. It's probably 10, 15 pages, where Ada's attacked by like 5 armed guards, and she's in an evening gown, and she pulls a gun off one of them, and she kills them all.
And she's totally badass.
And I'm like, isn't she a scavenger or something? Like, how did she do that? These were armed, trained, and we're told from earlier, it's implied that these guys are like serious war criminals that have been hired into this private army. By the police officer. So I'm like, wait a second. These guys, she's in an evening gown and she and high heels.
She's the Black Widow.
Yeah, I thought that was a bit much. And then later on in the sequence, a gunship is flying at them, a huge gunship, and she fires at this thing and it blows up. And it's not like she has a rocket launcher. She just has that same pistol. And I'm like, if you fired at a tank with a pistol, I don't think it would explode the tank. But yet... So the last 10 pages, I was like, I don't know. It kind of, all the goodwill it had kind of built up of how smart it was and how great these characters were and how beautifully it's drawn. All that kind of stuff was great. And then suddenly it became very silly. But then the ending was it was so unresolved. I was kind of like, okay, that's kind of cool. I did like how it ends with them. They're going to be hunted, through the galaxy. And we don't know, are they going to get away? All that kind of stuff. We don't know anything we just know that now they're on the run from now on, whether we get another chapter or not. That stuff was really good. But just before that, I don't know if he's trying to resolve it quickly somehow or what, or didn't have a different solution for her getting out of this mess. Or maybe in Volume 2, we'll get an explanation for why Ada is such a good fighter. But
maybe she has some hidden past.
Yeah, maybe, but maybe that should have been implied. Maybe it was implied and I missed it somewhere.
I didn't pick that up either. I mean, there's some reference to her home planet, but supposedly she had been trying to get away from her home planet and didn't like it. Maybe there's some particular reason she was getting away from it that she never told.
Well, that's a good question too, because that rich guy that wants her to he wants her to translate the slabs, the artifacts. Why her? Aren't there other people that speak this language anywhere that could do it? It seems like she's the only one. And
although she says she can't read them. She
says she can't, right? But are there other people from her planet? Are they rare? Like, is that the reason why this guy is so desperate to have her be the one to attempt to do it? It was. There were some questions for sure.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
But again, the answers aren't in there. Maybe they are. Maybe they aren't. So you're just kind of pulled along, and it really works the rest of the time.
Mm-hmm.
And she's really, also in that final sequence, she's really slow to put A and B together, to put 2 and 2 together and figure out, oh, wait a second, I know what's going on here. It's like 3 or 4 pages later, after she sees the tablets, she sees the name of the company on the tablets, and then she's like, a few pages later, it's like, oh, you're the guy. And I was like, yeah, I knew that 3 pages ago, Ada. What's wrong?
Yeah. If it's X2, then, yeah, you would think that he was responsible for that shipping crate. But, So, yeah, hopefully there's a sequel. But, I would recommend this.
Yeah. It's, like I said, I like an indie sci-fi comic for sure. And this really, it hit all the buttons. And I love the ship design. Also, we have, the art's got this kind of, I don't know what to call it. It's a little bit cartoony, especially in the character work. But there's so much effort that's gone into the designs. I'm just flipping through now, and I don't think he's skimped on a single background. Like every panel, you've got what's going on in the background, even if it's 2 talking heads. It's really a fully realized world. It must have been a huge effort of labor to put this comic together, which is why I'm a bit worried about a sequel, because who knows how many years this took to draw. I hope he did the shading on computer, because that at least would save a couple of minutes. It's really pretty great, despite my reservations about the ending, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I'm waiting for the movie.
Yeah.
Of course, Hollywood would definitely require more resolution than this gives us. So maybe if there's a second book, and then make one movie of the 2 of them.
Yeah, I also think because of something I recently covered on my other podcast, a comic book movie, one of the female leads would be changed into a male, unfortunately. Almost guaranteed. Especially for a science fiction movie, I have trouble imagining Hollywood would be happy with having 2 female leads.
Yeah, maybe not. Although these days, who knows? Maybe. I mean, we've got the Marvels coming up with 3 women leading it. So maybe. I mean, certainly as recently as just a few years ago, probably a male lead. But maybe not now.
Yeah.
The Hard Switch by Owen D. Pomery is published by Avery Hill. Coming up, Emmet and I disagree on Nicole Goux' pet peeves. But first, a reminder to join us for 20th Century TV and music trivia quiz videos and more on our Patreon page. Patrons donating $4 a month or more get access to our podcasts on the first 50 issues of The Amazing Spider-Man. We'll soon be finishing the series, and later this month, $4 and up patrons will get to vote on our next patrons-only podcast topic. Kumar, Emmet, Patrick, and I have come up with an interesting, unusual slate of topics to choose from, and I'll announce that slate here on the podcast next week. But the only way to vote on the topics or to hear the podcasts is to join us at patreon.com/deconcomics for at least $4 a month. We look forward to hearing from you. When you watched Batman as a kid, you enjoyed the colorful heroes and villains, the text sound effects on the screen, the thrill of watching a heroic crime fighter escaping from death traps and taking down bad guys. But the show was devised to interest adults, too. What did you miss as a kid? Sexual innuendo.
The penguin's too small for me.
Closeted gay characters.
I like that cape, Batman.
Freudian death traps.
Has the giant clam really swallowed Robin?
Police incompetence.
Bruce Wayne is a millionaire playboy. Hardly a secret identity for Batman.
Whether you're a kid or an adult, there's something to like about our favorite Caped Crusader. Tim and Paul dig for the deeper meanings under the Batmania every other Thursday. What's the podcast's name?
To the Batpoles. To the Batpoles. To the Batpoles.
All right, so now I'm back with Emmet in the Melbourne area, distant from Melbourne a bit. How are you?
Very distant from Melbourne. I was in All Star Comics in Melbourne the other day, and I ran into Troy, who's one of the owners of the business, and I haven't seen him in a while. And Troy said, "Oh, where are you living now?" And I said, I'm out near Castlemaine. And he he was like, "Oh, that's very far away," and I think that's real country. So that kind of gives you a sense of how remote people from Melbourne feel this is.
Okay.
But,
yeah, I don't have any sense of the distance between Country Victoria or wherever it is you are and Melbourne.
I am on my way into Melbourne tomorrow to meet Kumar. We're going to see a screening of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movie. It's come out. And by the time this recording drops, I'm sure it'll be out publicly. But we got a nice preview screening lined up for ourselves. And my getting into Melbourne is proving to be something of a complex issue where there's going to be trains, there's going to be buses, we're trying to align where we can actually meet before the screening's at a specific time. I'm trying to give myself a cushion, and it's all because I'm out, so it's considered remote. It's going to be a bit of a pain tomorrow morning, so I'm steeling myself for that.
Hitchhiking, riding a donkey, whatever.
Yeah, I need a montage. That's if I could skip to the montage, I would feel a lot better about life.
And what song is playing over the montage?
Oh, what song? Start Wearing Purple by Gogol Bordello is probably playing over the montage.
I know Gogol Bordello. Yeah, okay. All right.
Just hectic.
Okay, so what we're talking about in this half of the show is a book called Pet Peeves by Nicole Goux. And this actually came out a few months ago, and I got a PDF from Avery Hill, and I read it, and I didn't know what to make of it, and I didn't even consider reviewing it for the podcast until we were talking about reviewing some other Avery Hill books, and you mentioned that you had also read this.
Yes,
so I thought,
the physical copy here. I think I've mentioned before on this podcast that I've come around in Avery Hill quite a bit, and I quite like a lot of their output, and I've been supporting their Kickstarters, and it's one of the few publisher Kickstarters I think is a good deal for what you're getting, and you're supporting a small comics publisher business. So this arrived with a group of other books, a bunch of other books, and when you mentioned that you had it, I was like, oh well, let's have a chat.
So I don't know how you felt about this book. I had problems with it.
Okay.
And I don't know, it's one of those books like Punk Rock Jesus where every time I read it, I like it less. Or I find more things to criticize about it. I don't know. I think... well, okay. Before I get to that, so... I should mention Nicole Goux was the artist on Everyone is Tulip, which was written by Dave Baker. And I talked to both of them on episode 697 of this podcast. So if you scroll back a couple years, you can find that interview. And I reviewed that book with Jason, and we both liked it quite a bit. So... Now, of course, there's no Dave Baker involved in this book, Pet Peeves, but I was kind of, anticipating that I was going to like it, that it would have maybe a similar flavor to that. And at the start, I felt like it was going to be in the same vein. We've got a young woman named Bobby who's working in a bar. She has dreams of a music career. I'm sorry?
The Pig's Knuckles is the name of the bar.
The Pig's Knuckles, yeah, is the name of the bar. She's rooming with another woman who has a girlfriend, and Bobby is kind of retreated to a corner of the apartment to give them space, just sleeping with these office partitions around her. Yeah,
her college friend Clara, who has a regular job and is effectively paying for the apartment.
Mm-hmm.
So Bobby has irregular work, and she's stuck at this dead-end job and creatively frustrated, wants to be a singer, as you were saying before. But Clara actually has income coming in, is in a stable relationship. It's more or less paying for everything. And yeah, Bobby's doing the familiar 20-something equivalent of sleeping on her couch.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So then she adopts this stray dog that appears when she's walking home late at night. And
Barkley the dog.
I'm sorry?
Barkley the dog.
Yeah. Well, Lieutenant Barkley from a Star Trek The Next Generation character. Yes. After she adopts this dog, then her life seems to go even more off the rails. The dog is making a mess of the apartment, and Claire is getting angry about it, and Bobby seems to have lost the desire to even be a musician. Mm-hmm. And I don't want to completely spoil the ending, but the dog turns out to be more than it appears the end. Yes. And I found that the marketing for this book actually calls it a horror graphic novel.
Which is fair.
Well, is it?
I mean, it's fair. I mean, I think, we don't want to go into spoilers, but I would also reflect on the nature of Bobby's life. I mean,
that's a different kind of horror, though. That's
not the economic precarious horror of our existence right now. But you've got a generation of young people who've basically been sold down the river and they've got nothing.
Yeah, it's not what's traditionally called horror. Horror, you expect like people, in danger of losing their lives because some maniac is after them or something like that.
Well, no, I mean, horror typically works as metaphor. I mean, one of the key horror texts in the Western canon is Dracula. What's Dracula horror? What's its horrific theme? Immigration. It's racist immigration fears. That's what Dracula's about. It's an Irishman in Britain projecting his own sense of self-loathing for his identity onto people from Eastern Europe. The way that they talk about Hungarian people in Dracula, the novel, if you read the actual novel, is pretty horrific. And this sort of modernist reaction against mainland Europe, where you've got this idea of these British people traveling across Europe and using all these sophisticated forms of communication, the telegram, versus these superstitious villager types. They're so backward, they're so primitive. There's this contrast between the idea of us and them. That's what Dracula stokes its flames on. It's not about vampires, really. It's about people that we've decided to just disdain. Mm-hmm. This book is somebody who everybody's telling her she's useless. She's a loser. She wants to do these things. She wants to be a musician, but she's being blocked at each point. And then she starts to block herself, in effect. The dog is Barclay's almost an excuse not to do anything, not to keep the apartment clean, not to get up in time for work, drink all night, not actually practice her music. Why she can't get a gig at her shitty bar job performing at 2 a.m. What's the point? It's the death of ambition. Mm-hmm. And I kind of feel as if that sense of she accepts that sense of resentment into her and just goes, yeah, there's no point. Mm-hmm. And there is something horrific about that. I was chilled by this. I feel this is the flip side, and I apologize to Nicole Goux because I hope this is not a comparison that gets thrown at her too much. I feel like this is the flip side of Scott Pilgrim, where Scott Pilgrim's also about a loser, dead-end jobs, not really much to his name, but he's got this inner fantasy world where he's the hero and he's punching people into the moon and he's doing all these crazy things, and he's living in this anime fantasy about his love life. Whereas in this book, it's a descent into like psychological horror, and it ends on this twist of the knife, which, I think I was on the train when I was on the train back from Melbourne. I was on the train back from a long day at work. I was tired. I read this on the train, and I think I messaged you, and I was freaked out by it. It really disturbed me. So, yeah, I don't know if it's necessary for us to kung fu fight over this, Tim, because you didn't like this. I loved it. I thought it was great. But,
yeah, well, I think the thing that really bothers me about it is that I think a lot of it had to do with my expectations. Okay. But the book itself kind of set my expectations that this was going to be a realistic story, and I think I was kind of expecting something to kind of turn around for her at the end, and then all of a sudden you're like in the last scene of the book, and it takes this other turn, and it's like, oh, I forgot to tell you what genre this book is what it felt like to me, and it felt really abrupt, like an abrupt change of direction, and I was like, what? The last scene was just puzzling to me.
There is a dream sequence early in the book that's reminiscent of that Scarlett Johansson movie Under the Skin, which I think would be described as a sci-fi horror movie, but the majority of the movie is Scarlett Johansson walking around a Scottish city inviting men to come home with her. And then we fade to black. And we don't know what's happening to those men. And eventually we do find out what's happening to those men. But up to that point, you could describe Under the Skin as a semi-realistic depiction of somebody having casual sex in a city. That's what it seems to be. But then there's a twist. Mm-hmm. I don't know if that was an influence of this, but I can see there being a relationship in terms of that idea of a flipping of the genre. I don't think that discounts it. That's a technique. But yeah, I was quite interested in it. I read an interview with Goux where she talked about her influences, and she mentioned, she has a background in fine art, but she loves manga, and she loves that sort of introducing sort of punkish aesthetic to her work. I can see that here. But she also name-checked Emily Carroll and Glyn Dillon. And I can see both of them do similar things, where you've got this sort of seemingly ordinary situation, and then there'll be this eruption of surrealism into the everyday. Yeah, Emily Carroll in particular.
In fairness, rereading it, knowing what the ending is, I found there were a few places in the book that kind of vaguely hinted at it, that were too subtle for me, and I didn't notice them. There were several. So you mentioned the dream sequence right after she adopts the dog.
Yes.
I think after we read the end, we kind of understand what's happening there.
Yeah.
And then on page 58, she's sleeping in a chair with the dog on her lap, and the kind of lower half of her face is just kind of nothing, or appears to be just a vague cloud or something. And, it's really easy to miss if you're not looking for it. And then there's also the scene on page 63 of the PDF where Bobby's shopping and she's got the dog on her back, and we can't see the dog so well. And this other woman in the store acts scared of the dog. And I think she's probably seeing what we see at the end of the book.
I think it's potentially, I think that particular bit is the idea of you have your dog out and about, and people reach in to touch your dog, and the dog doesn't appreciate that. The dog's personal space has been violated, so the dog will growl or snarl or bare its teeth. And that's where, the woman says, if you can't train your animal to be in public, maybe you shouldn't have one at all. But you're right. I mean, potentially she's seeing something even more.
She says eek. That seems a little over the top for an average dog.
I had a angry little woman of a dog years ago. Daisy was her name. And I'd go walking about with her, particularly at night, because she was very hyperactive. She was a border collie and kept the suburban house is not a good place for a border collie. And people would approach us, and Daisy would immediately bare her fangs, like straight away, like, get away from me. So that's initially what I interpreted that sequence is about. On my initial,
it could be that, yeah.
That's all I saw.
Seems like that on the first read, yeah.
Yeah, but I think your interpretation is an interesting one.
So I looked at some other reviews, and some reviewers really loved the book. And it was like what you're saying, that it's just kind of she's kind of descending into kind of nothingness. And in that sense, maybe it's kind of like Bonfire of the Vanities.
Yeah.
Where it's just like losing things and there's kind of no hope for the main character at the end.
Yeah. Descent is a common theme between Bonfire of the Vanities and this as well. Like, and like Tom Wolfe was writing satire there. Like that was an exaggerated version of life in New York in the 80s. But I think there is something here too that is exaggerated in a way that you don't notice until it's too late. So there's I think I can see that. That's an interesting comparison. The one I thought of was Rabbit Run, John Updike.
Okay.
Which is 20 years again before Wolf. But that was a book about a man having a midlife crisis. Like, oh no, I'm stuck in this marriage. Oh no, I'm stuck in this job. Oh, I have to get away from this suburban life. This is somebody in her 20s who has no money and has no prospects, hasn't got a place to live really. Ends up her living circumstances change in the course of this book. And I felt like that was a generational comment. You know, it's interesting, the comparison. John Updike's talking about a man feeling things are inconvenient for me. And Goux is writing about young people who are like, I've got nothing to my name. Nothing.
Student loans, no hope of ever buying a house. Yeah. I
mean, I find it interesting that her peer group, you've got Clara, who, I mean, the old term for it would have been sold out. Like she's gone, I don't know if she's gone corporate, but she's got a steady income. She's got a job after college, and she's
working
now
for
set.
The man.
She's working for the man. But then Jay is interesting because Jay seems to be a streamer. He seems to be making his money playing video games. Or maybe he's a tester for video games?
Well, yeah, it's not very clear, but yeah, Clara says at one point that he's kind of hacked life and he's just making money playing video games somehow.
And I thought that was interesting because that speaks to an aspect of this generation coming up, which is that you can't wait for society to actually have established pathways for you to follow anymore. Those pathways have been disabled. And you can't advance them. So they've hacked their own way. They've adapted. They've hustled. You see that from all the different performative activities online of young people, like selling their online activities, selling themselves, selling images of themselves, whatever it is. And I kind of feel that that's the space Jay's in. So between Jay and Clara, you've got two people who've worked out how to sell a part of themselves. And Bobby can't do that. And Bobby instead is stuck in a job where she's just getting disrespected by drunk men. It's friend does. The sequence of the men ordering beers, and it just keeps descending and descending and descending.
Yeah, smaller and smaller and smaller panels.
Yeah, it reminded me of John McNaught a bit. You know, some of his work for Nobrow, and now he's onto bigger things now. But like, he would do that as well. This idea of like quotidian activity being represented by smaller and smaller paneling.
Yeah, just going on and on and on and on.
These little moments breaking down. Yeah. So I was impressed by that. That sense of her just stuck, you know.
Now, there was another review I read on a website called theslingsанdarrows.com.
Oh yeah.
Written by, and I'm gonna say an Irish name here, so cover me. Ian Keogh, is that right? Keogh. Keogh.
Just Keogh.
Keogh. Yeah, well, I saw
like the beginning of Kyoto.
Okay. I don't know, the videos I found were saying in Irish it's Keogh.
It's just different pronunciations, but Keogh is the English form.
Yeah, or Keogh was another pronunciation I heard that was kind of the quote-unquote English pronunciation. Anyway, Ian Keogh, who I basically agreed with, he felt that the ending was puzzling and seemingly tacked on. Another point that he made, and I initially agreed with this, but after what you just said, I'm questioning it.
Okay.
So he feels that the story wanders away from Bobby too much, that we have scenes that she's not in.
They're always talking about her.
Sometimes, although there's a conversation about whether Clara is ready to have a girlfriend move in, which is not about Bobby. But
well, it is, because Bobby's presence in the apartment is one of the reasons why the girlfriend can't move in.
Well, yeah.
That's the pressure.
But we were talking about Jay here and about Clara and their situations, and I think that those conversations are there for comparison to Bobby's situation.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah, okay.
I agree. I think that's what's going on there. I mean, it's just the way that they have found safe purchase in this hustle life, and Bobby hasn't. And Bobby, at the start of the story, seemed to be hanging out at this dead-end job because she's got proximity to a stage, and she feels she's got talent, and her friends are encouraging her to perform, and she's sitting there night after night taking abuse from punters, and people are performing on stage and they're terrible. Like, we know that we're told that they're bad.
Right.
So she's going, if I could just get up there, I could show people what I could do. And then maybe my fortunes would change, which is that old myth. That's the old idea that, you just need one shot and then you're set, which is rubbish. And I don't think it was ever real, but like it's rubbish. But she's clinging to that.
Yeah, well, I think she does finally get to perform and doesn't really lead to anything.
Yeah, I think she's hanging on to this dream of what her life could be. And I think it's a dream she's been sold. Whereas the other two have more or less got it figured out. Mm-hmm. We haven't talked about the scene with her ex as well, but even that's interesting, where he's bringing his new partner into the bar.
And they're making out at their table.
Yeah. And she's like, this is my bar. What are you doing? That's how little he thinks of her. Like, he's brought his new partner into this situation. And he's been intimate with this girlfriend at the bar, and Bobby has to watch, and then just proceeds to get very drunk. So, like, there's a lot of themes of self-annihilation happening here as well, like alcoholism, or just maybe not unnecessarily alcoholism, but drinking to excess. Part of that is I just want this day to end now. I'm just shutting down my emotions. I'm just shutting down this day, and that's destructive behavior. So I find it sad, but well observed, and that's why I enjoyed the book. And then for it to have that twist of the knife, as I keep saying, at the end, for me, I enjoyed that because I didn't expect it, but it felt like in keeping with the metaphor of somebody's life and ambition just being drained away. So it worked for me. And it's just occurred to me, I find it funny that I launched into my little screed about Dracula when this is all about something being sucked away from somebody. Like, there is a similar theme of vital life force being drained in texts. Maybe not an obvious one, and maybe an obscure one for me to launch, but there you go.
Yeah, figuratively and literally.
I'm an Irishman who... I used to work in Bram Stoker's office. He's buried into the back of my brain. I always think of Bram. Yeah.
A couple other things. I did mostly like the art, although I'm kind of puzzled by the way she draws feet.
Okay.
You've heard of Bigfoot cartooning. This is like big ankle cartooning.
Oh, interesting.
I particularly noticed it in that dream sequence where Bobby is walking like naked through this water in the dark. And just the shape of her feet kind of distracted me. But overall, I liked it. Now, another thing that I think the one place where the art really confused me, if it's the art exactly, but so if we look at page 46 of the PDF, and you've got a paper book, I'm not sure if the page number is the same. But Clara and Jay are texting,
Yeah, I was just looking at that sequence.
And their text conversation is kind of laid over the art, and it confused me because, in the text program, these are word balloons, or shaped as word balloons, but they are not comic book word balloons. They are text word balloons. And I was really confused because the balloons that are labeled as Clara were pointing to Jay, and like, Jay, is that Clara? Am I confused about names here? But that's the person reading a WhatsApp. Right,
message.
but I think it wasn't clear enough in the art what those balloons, because, if it's a comic and you see word balloons and you think that the person that they're pointing to is speaking, but she should have had the J text word balloons pointing to J. That would have been a little easier, or else somehow differentiated a little bit so that it's clear that these word balloons are not word balloons in the comic. They are a text screen.
Right, I see. I find it's really interesting that because this is what the person's seeing as they look at their device. Jay's looking at Jay's looking at a message. It's pointing to Jay, and above it says Clara, because that's what Jay sees. Jay's message to Clara is pointing off panel in the direction of Clara, who's receiving it, and it says Jay because she sees Jay.
Right.
So I followed it from that way, and then once we've established that rule and where the pointing directs the message to, we no longer have the names, but we can actually see then Clara looking at her phone and seeing Jay above the message. So and she's replying to Jay.
But I think it wasn't clear enough.
Okay.
That was a text screen and not word balloons in the comic.
Yeah, I think we're going to see more of this. We're going to see more of artists reflecting their digital native reality. Mm-hmm. And in this case, this particular app uses speech balloons.
Sure.
Like WhatsApp uses speech balloons, and that's how it structures it.
Yeah, I have no problem with that. It's just that she needed to have like a phone shape around them or something so that it was clear what they were and what they were not.
Right. Yeah. Okay.
But yeah, okay. I'll at least say after this conversation, I like this book better than Punk Rock Jesus.
Okay, that's faint praise, but just I will sum up that I as I said before, I really enjoyed it. It disturbed me. I found it interesting. I found it engaging. I have not read Nicole Goux before. I've not read work by her before. I will now be looking at more of her material.
I think this was the first book that she's written. She's drawn for other writers, but I think this is the first one that was actually, the story was by her.
Right.
One other thing I wanted to mention: the next to last scene where she's at the dog park.
Yes.
And this guy with a man bun comes along, who says, he's allergic to dogs, so he can't have one, so he just comes to the dog park to watch the dogs. Yeah. And he's really encouraging toward her and her music career. And she's saying, like, I'm kind of a musician, or maybe I'm not anymore, but you play music? You are a musician, he's saying. And, let me know, if you make it. I'd like to, he wants to kind of follow her career if it happens. And I'm trying to figure out what that scene is doing there. It's kind of like one last bit of hope for her before the bottom falls out.
Yeah, I think that's it. I think that's all it is. He's this attractive dude. He sort of sits beside her. You think it's a meet cute. But even as he walks away, like, and he's giving her this encouraging remark, she's like, how are you going to know it's me? Like, she's whispering it to herself. She doesn't want to actually spoil the moment almost. But the suggestion of, he's just being blandly encouraging, like, yeah, you can do it, pursue your dreams. And like, it's just, what does that amount to really? When you're so lost in self-resentment, like, that could actually be harmful almost. The suggestion of just a little further, you'll make it. And no, look, I've done this. This is not happening. It's an interesting moment, and the fact that we have the splash page just to sort of have that pause in the book.
Yeah, there's a whole 2-page panel of the two of them on the bench.
Yeah, there's this sort of again, it's sort of hinting at maybe a romantic intimacy or the promise of romantic intimacy, but then it doesn't amount to, because he just walks away and there's no way for her to contact him again. Like that's
and they don't trade contact info at all.
And even his, I'm interested in dogs, but I can't have dogs, so I just watch dogs. He's at a remove.
Mm-hmm.
There's something distant about him.
Mm.
And he wants to participate, but he doesn't want to participate. So there's something very odd about that in terms of what he represents. It's a bit empty, really. So I found it, again, like that's queuing us up for disappointment in an interesting way.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like it's another cruel moment for Bobby. I think it's an interesting sequence.
Yeah. Okay, so yeah, I mean, I guess you liked it better than I did, but I'm kind of understanding the book a little better now, anyway.
Well, that's the point of any discussion, and like I can see your critique. I can see where it's coming from, and I think I perhaps it's a personality thing. I think we've established already that I much prefer horror.
Yeah, and I'm not a horror fan at all. So,
and I also like oblique endings. Like I like odd endings. That's something I really enjoy. So, Toby Dammit is one of my favorite horror movies, and it's a short film by Fellini from the 60s. It's crazy weird, but it's lived in my head ever since I saw it for the first time, and it has one of the strangest endings. So that's my jam.
Pet Peeves by Nicole Goux is published by Avery Hill. If this is the kind of comics talk you enjoy, consider supporting this podcast by joining us on Patreon at patreon.com/deconcomics, and go to deconstructingcomics.com to connect to us on Twitter, X, Facebook, or YouTube, to shop on Amazon to support the show, and to find links to subscribe to the podcast. You can comment on any episode there, or drop us a line at mail@deconstructingcomics.com. That's also the address for submitting your own comics work for possible inclusion in our spin-off podcast, Critiquing Comics. Our theme is by J.B. Anderton. Kumar and Emmet have seen the film Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles: Mutant Mayhem, and next week they'll be here to present their review. Till then, this is Tim, and thanks for listening to Deconstructing Comics.